Hello and welcome back to Mirror's Signal podcast. This mini-series is brought to you by Talking Send with Dr. Julia Malkin MBE, which is a Patreon page where members get access to a large number of videos to help you understand your neurodiverse learners on driving lessons. This mini-series is 10 episodes with Julia, going through 10 tips for teaching neurodiverse learners. I hope you enjoy these episodes. Julia, welcome back for episode number 2 of our mini series, where we're going through your 10 tips for teaching neurodiverse learners. So, what are we going to be talking about in this episode?
Well, I think the basic thing with neurodiverse people, we talked last time about how the world is different because the way we see it. And the world we see it is a difference in the brain. So I think we need to go into brains and how to work with the brain. And I think working with the brain is a massive big key because I've seen a number of instructors that look at the fact that they're just trying to teach the usual way, and our brain doesn't accept it and just thinking, we're not learning, we're getting stressed out. And that's because they're not working with the brain. You've got to work with it rather than against it. Now, if you're dealing with a neurodiverse person, I mean, the brain is set up in a different way. Now, I always mention it, and I'll mention it again, that it's very similar to kind of like having two phones that's one an Apple and one an Android, and they can both go on Google, they can both go on YouTube and the Facebook, but they need two different apps. And so you need to know which kind of app to load into your phone, and that's the difference between these two brains. They can do the same thing, but they need to have the information loaded in a different way to be able to get the programs running in here. Now, it's a well-known fact that the differences in the brain, it's a massive, massive problem if you don't work with it. I'm going to give you some of the risks first, I think, if you don't work with it. It's very important to take this into account. The first thing that we get is overloading. And overloading is a problem when the brain gets information coming in at a higher speed than we can process. Now, brains run at 29 bits per second, and of that, roughly about 4 or 5 is used for communication. So that's processing incoming info and formulating replies and replying out. For everyday people, it's kind of like 4 or 5. To us, it's about 8 or 9. We use more bits per second of communication in our brain than the everyday person. Now, because of that, the first thing it does is to limit the amount of available remaining space for everything else. Now, by the time we finish the communication, how much there is remaining for all the other stuff. So obviously, at some point, you're going to find us taking information at a slower speed in other areas because there's so much focus on this communication. Basically, I've known it possible, well, they're doing research on brains, doing research on it now, and they're finding the possibility of the hemispheres in the brain have got the right one that's processing all the logic, and the left one's got the logic, and the right one's got all the design factors. It's got the 2 factors, one straightforward names, mathematics, sums, places, and the other one's all abstract, very artistic, colour, and how to interpret different things, almost like artists do. So your left one's your logic side, and that takes all the logic stuff, and 90% of the world runs on logic stuff. But sometimes it gets so lost in communication and trying to get replies that what happens is that this hemisphere here asks for help from that one. And it actually says, excuse me, I want some help over here because I can't interpret all this language. So what happens is that the other hemisphere kicks in and they got both working together. That's been proven. You've actually got these 2 hemispheres working together to solve a problem. But the only thing is you're bringing the creative side of the brain in. So then it views the language like a work of art. It sees it abstract. You might find sometimes when you're communicating to one of us and you're asking us a question, if we ever go around staring into outer space, trying to figure out what you're saying, or we stare out at the window almost like we've not heard you, or anything like that, sometimes you can hear the cogs going around, sometimes you can feel the wheels. That could be what's happening. So it's taking a lot of communication to do that, isn't it? I've got one thing saying to the other one, excuse me, both work together. Now, when that happens, the first thing you got to understand, it takes twice the amount of energy, right? Because you've got like two hemispheres together. So therefore, the energy obviously is going to increase by double, which means the energy you got to make for your driving lesson is going to halve. Now, that's what you got to think of. You'll need regular breaks. Working with the brain means you'll need more regular breaks. You'll probably need a shorter lesson span time total. And you'll need a bit more regular breaks than the everyday person would. This is how our brain's working. Also, a lot of drivers don't understand that if you're teaching us to drive, you're teaching us two languages at the same time. You're teaching us a language of the highway code and the way the road is designed, or rules, regulations, signs, traffic lights, etc. And then there's the language of the road users. There's the invisible body language of the pedestrians who are about to cross. There's drivers with the use of signals and road position, etc. So you're teaching us two languages every single time we teach us to drive. What do we say about communication? Use us twice as much as the everyday person. And that also applies, of course, to this standard highway code rules which you've got to learn, and all the regulations. And also with the driver's language, especially the driver's language, because that's so changeable. And you've got to learn how the whole kind of fits together. It can be a problem. Walking with the brain means that first of all, you reduce the stress with communication. How do we do that? When you ask us questions, make sure questions are sharp and as short as you can get. So any lengthy explanations you pull us in, try not to ask us anything lengthy on the road, don't be able to understand you much. Secondly, one question per sentence. How do neurotypical people speak? How are you? How are you doing? How is everything? 1, 2, 3. There's 3 questions in a sentence. I mean, come on, are we overloading or what? Now, one question per sentence. One question per sentence. How are you today? Notice I've been specific. If you say, how are things, it might wander off, right? What do you want to know? Do you want to know what the weather's like in America, or how the Dow Jones is doing, or what kind of things are you interested in? We can tell you a lot of information. Especially in the autism spectrum, you can absorb a lot of facts. Don't ask us just questions that it might be short, but is it in detail? You don't say, how's college? It's nice and short, but it won't work with some of us. With some of us, we'll just say it's still there. So you want to know more about how the person is. Have you been to college? So what have you been studying? And so then it's more personal too. So bit more detail. Bit more detail in that you would do with an everyday person, because we've got an imagination gap. And that imagination gap's a brain difference. So what we're doing, working with the brain. Fill those imagination gaps in. There's a lot of gaps in social imagination that we have trouble filling in. And that's what makes this hemisphere here say, excuse me, I don't understand. Wake up, you. Want some help? And that's what causes all the trouble. There's lack of detail because there's social imagination gapping. So working with the brain means, because there's less stress on communication, if you're filling those imagination gaps in by putting detail in, keeping your questions shorter and to the point, and one question per sentence, then it doesn't overload. It doesn't use so much stress and strain. You don't get this hemisphere saying to this one, excuse me, I want some help. So that leaves energy for everything else. We have more energy left to drive. We've got more energy left to learn. We've got more energy left to concentrate. Work with the brain, not against it. Work with it. Get it to work for you. Get it working.
There's some interesting points there. And The communication really stood out to me. I've got
Well,
a
well,
learner at the moment.
communication's another section which we'll be covering because it's such a massive, big issue. So that's
It
one of the
was,
points I'll be covering in another one of these programs. It's big, isn't it? Big issue.
yeah, and I found what you were saying really interesting about the hemispheres and the asking that question and then seeing the cogs turning. Because the learner, when I posed the question, does kind of just stare out of the front. And I have to fight the urge to reword the question or give the answer. And I'll sit and I'll wait. And they do give an answer, but it's longer than what I'm used to. And I almost feel when we first started to learn, they was kind of used to people giving the answer. So the pause now, I'm noticing it's starting to get a little bit less. I don't know why that is, probably a bit of confidence and familiar with what we're doing. But that delay and what you were saying about the amount of extra brain power it takes for the communication aspect kind of makes sense as to what was happening in that lesson in the delay from me asking the question to the pupil answering the question.
Yeah. I'll definitely be covering this in more detail in another one of these episodes because I must admit it's such a big issue. But it's very important to work with the brain, working with it. And now you've got a rough idea what's going on in that brain. It makes it a lot easier for you to understand it. To be able to know that these hemispheres actually work together. One can switch to the other one, saying, want some help? Yes, they do. And of course, that drops the energy, you see.
I'm looking forward to the next one where we talk about the
When we talk
communication and
communication,
how that's
yeah.
going to be different. But yeah, the working with the brain, I get it. I understand it. I need to work more on it. And I think that as well can work for everyone, neurodiverse,
Oh,
neurotypical,
absolutely.
just
Yeah, reduce the amount of
anyone's
brain.
brain.
Yeah,
An excellent tip there, Julia. Thank you very much. And guys, make sure you stay tuned for the next one. We've got 10 of these coming up, and Julia's already given a spoiler for what might be coming up in one of the next few episodes. So we will catch you on the next one. But Julia, thank you very much.
thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So thank you for listening or watching that episode. If you would like more information from Julia, or you would like to learn more about teaching neurodiverse learners, you can find all the information in the description, or you can sign up to the Patreon membership. Just search for Talking Send with Dr. Julia Malkin MBE. Thank you.